Hi there again, everybody. I'm Heidi Postle and I'm here from A+ Maths. Today, I'd like to do a revision of all the different types of questions that we've gone through in the last few videos on quadratic equations. We've finally come to the end of quadratics, and now I just want to consolidate and make sure that everybody remembers all the different types. Remember, quadratic equations have to be with an x squared, an x, a number, and preferably equal to 0. But don't forget, they don't always have to equal 0. If you're told in a question to use a particular method, either to use the formula or to use completing the square, then you have to do what the question tells you to do. Otherwise, you get to choose which method you prefer. If you don't know which method you prefer, or you're having a lot of trouble understanding which one to use, you could always use the formula. There's nothing wrong with that. So let's have a look at the first one. My first question, x squared minus 36 equals 0. So, I think the easiest way to do this is to take the 36 to the other side. And then I have x squared equals 36. Once I have x squared equals a number, I can square root both sides and I'm left with x equals plus or minus 6. I haven't really gone into a lot of detail on how to leave the answers, but don't forget that sometimes you can write the answer as x equals plus or minus 6. Don't forget that there's still two answers, x equals 6 and x equals minus 6. But we can write that short form, x equals plus or minus 6. If you still prefer to separate them, that's fine. Question number 2. X minus 1 all squared equals 9. Great. This question is very similar to question number 1, except that I don't have any brackets in question number 1. I can do it the same way. I can square root both sides, and what am I left with? X minus 1 equals plus or minus 3. I'm going to separate it. I'm going to have x minus 1 equals 3, or x minus 1 can equal minus 3. And then I solve each one separately. X equals 4 and x equals minus 2. If you did it all in one go and you wrote down x equals 1 plus or minus 3 and then did it separately, that's fine too. But I think a lot of people like to separate them. I'll stick with separating them. Question number 3. 2x minus 5, bracket, 5x plus 3 can equal 0. Now, do you remember what to do when they had the brackets? Hopefully, you've got 0 times something can equal 0, or something times 0 can equal 0. Remember that one of the brackets has to equal 0. So I have 2x minus 5 can equal 0, or 5x plus 3 can equal 0. And then I solve each one separately. 2x can equal 5, and then divide both sides by 2, x can equal 5 over 2, or 5x equals minus 3, and then divide both sides by 5, so x equals minus 3 over 5. How are you finding them so far? So far, so good? Question number 4. X squared minus 5x minus 14 equals 0. Of course, if you don't understand how to spot which method to use, you could always just use the formula here because it's really nicely in the right form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. But I like to see if it factorizes first, because I think that factorizing is a lot easier than using the formula sometimes, because at the end, the simplifying in a quadratic formula can be quite difficult. So let's have a look. Can we find a number that multiplies to give 14 and adds to give minus 5? Good. 7 times 2. Minus 7 and plus 2. So we've got x minus 7 and x plus 2 equals 0. And don't forget, what did we do? Minus 7 plus 2 gives me minus 5. And minus 7 times plus 2 gives me minus 14. So that's definitely correct. And then I solve each one. I have x minus 7 can equal 0, or x plus 2 can equal 0, and I've got x equals 7, or x equals minus 2. Question number 5. 3x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 0. Again, if you prefer to use the formula, this is a perfect example of when you can use the formula and just solve it easily using that. But I'm going to try to factorize first. Do you remember how to solve a non-monic quadratic? I hope so. If not, go back to one of the earlier videos and revise it so that you can do these and you can follow along. So what do? We prepare it. 3x all over 3 equals 0. Then we go 3 times 1 is 3. We're looking for a number that multiplies to give 3 and adds to give 4. Well, that's going to be 3 and 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Good. What do I end up with? 3x plus 3, 3x plus 1, all over 3 equals 0. Now remember, we need to factorise one or both of the brackets so that those 3's cancel. Here, I'm lucky I only have to factorise one of the brackets. And which one's that going to be? 3x plus 3, because it has a common factor of 3 in both. So I'm going to get 3 bracket x plus 1 bracket 3x plus 1 all over 3 equals 0. Of course, the 3's cancel. That was the whole point of doing it, remember, to cancel those 3's. And what's left? X plus 1 can equal 0, or 3x plus 1 can equal 0, and then I solve each one. X can equal minus 1, or in the second one, I take the 1 to the other side. I'm left with 3x equals minus 1, and then divide both sides by 3, and I have x equals minus 1 over 3. How did you go? How are you going with them? Are you remembering which method to use at which time? You might find it useful to pause the video after I've written the question on the top and have a go at it on your own, and then see if you get it right. That's a really good practice to get into. And then you've got the worked solution afterwards to check your answer. Let's try one now using the quadratic formula. Let's have a look at question number 6. 3x squared minus 10x minus 17 equals 0. Now hopefully you watched my last video on the quadratic formula, so you know what to do. We write down the formula. X equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Write down the values of a, b and c. A equals 3, b equals minus 10, and c equals minus 17. Don't forget about the minuses. Remember, the minus always goes with the number after it. And then we substitute the numbers in the right spot. That shouldn't be too bad, especially if you've got your brackets ready to go. And then we solve it. We simplify it. X equals minus 10 is plus 10, plus or minus the square root of, work that bit out on the calculator, 304 all over 2 times 3 is 6. Now we have to simplify the bit inside the square root. So we have x equals 10 plus or minus 4 root 19 all over 6, because 16 times 19 is 304. That's a tricky one, isn't it? Did everybody spot that? I can look at the top and the bottom. I should be able to see that I can factorize out a 2 from the top. So I have x equals 2 bracket 5 plus or minus 2 root 19 all over 6. I can then cancel the 2 into the 6, which goes 3 times, and then what am I left with? X equals 5 plus or minus 2 root 19 all over 3. How did you go? They're probably the most difficult ones, where you need to keep simplifying that surd. And of course, if you're having trouble with that, go back to surds from year 9 and revise it and make sure that you know how to simplify a surd. Because you don't want to get stuck solving a quadratic equation because you don't know how to do surds. All right, question number 7. This time I'm telling you that I want to use completing the square, because really the only time you're going to use completing the square to solve a quadratic equation is mainly when you're told to, because most people don't really like this method, so we only do it if we have to. X squared minus 7x minus 4 equals 0. Do you remember how to complete the square? So we set it up. Remember, put the letters on the left, x squared minus 7x, leave a space, equals, take the minus 4 to the other side, 4, and then get your brackets ready underneath. X minus something all squared equals 4. Now we prepare it. Something squared plus something squared plus that something inside the brackets plus something squared. Make sure that the minuses are the same. The number in front of the x is minus 7, so that has to be a minus in the brackets. Now remember what we need to add in all the brackets that we've set up? Half the number in front of the x. And what's half of 7? 7 over 2. Remember how we get that? 7 divided by 2 is the same as 7 over 2. So we write 7 over 2 in all our brackets. And what does that mean we're left with? X minus 7 over 2 all squared equals 65 on 4. How did we get the 65 on 4? Use your calculator. That's the easiest. And then we need to square root both sides. And when we square root both sides, we're left with x minus 7 over 2 equals the square root of 65 on 4, or x minus 7 over 2 equals minus the square root of 65 over 4. Right, now we need to simplify the square root of 65 over 4. Remember how to do that? We've got the square root of 65 over 4, which equals the square root of 65 over the square root of 4, which equals the square root of 65 over 2, because the square root of 4 equals 2. We can bring that back over here and simplify these two solutions. And we're going to have x minus 7 over 2 equals the square root of 65 over 2, or x minus 7 over 2 equals minus the square root of 65 over 2. And then we just have to take the 7 over 2 back to the other side. So we have x equals 7 over 2 plus the square root of 65 over 2, or x equals 7 over 2 minus the square root of 65 over 2. How did you go with that? Hopefully you remembered how to do completing the square. If not, go back, have a look at the last video. It's quite tricky to remember how to do everything, especially if you've only done a few of them. Don't get scared. Just keep doing it. Keep practicing. Practice makes perfect. And really, maths is all about practice. You're doing a really good job. If you're getting to the end of this video and you've understood most of it up until now, good on you. Keep going. You will get it eventually. It just takes time. We only have one more question to do. 2x squared minus 5x minus 1 equals 0. We're going to do this one by completing the square as well, because what I'd like to do is to show you one more completing the square. And of course this one has the number in front of the x squared. It has a equals 2. And that means that we need to divide everything by 2 first. So you have x squared minus 5 over 2x minus a half equals 0. Remember, what's the first thing we need to do? Take the constant to the other side. So we're left with x squared minus 5 over 2x equals a half. Make sure you've left spaces for the brackets. And we need to prepare the next line for completing the square. So we've got x minus something all squared equals a half. Everything's ready. Put your brackets in the right spot so that we're ready to add the necessary number to complete the square. And what do we need to add? Half the number in front of the x squared. So we need to add half of 5 over 2. And half of 5 over 2 is what? 5 over 4. Good if you can figure it out. If not, do it on your calculator. Or 5 over 2 divided by 2 is the same as 5 over 2 divided by 2 over 1, which is 5 over 2 times by 1 over 2, which is 5 over 4. So you can choose. You can either do it in your head or write it down on the side, or you can just use your calculator. Either way, we know we're adding 5 over 4. We put it in all our spaces that we prepared earlier. And what are we left with? X minus 5 over 4 all squared equals 33 on 16. Where does that come from? Use your calculator. And then we have to square root both sides. And we're left with x minus 5 over 4 equals the square root of 33 over 16, or x minus 5 over 4 equals minus the square root of 33 over 16. You can then simplify the square root of 16, which is 4. And what are we left with for the answers? X equals 5 over 4 plus the square root of 33 on 4, or x equals 5 over 4 minus the square root of 33 on 4. And we've finished for the day. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, which shows you all the different methods of solving a quadratic equation. My next video will be on more tricky questions, where you have to put them into the right form to be able to actually solve it. Good luck. Hopefully I'll see you soon. I hope you're enjoying my videos so far. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.